Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are. So this is actually my last presentation at NAB 2017. And there's a raffle going on over there or something. I have good news for everybody. You will get that part of your soul that's been taken away back once you go home from Las Vegas. So my name is Schofield. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about all of this stuff right here. The Alexa Mini, the relatively new Master Grips, and how I've started to use this in my productions, and I do shoot with a lot of different camera systems. I'm one or all of or parts of these depending on the production that I'm doing, but I am a producer, director. Sometimes I'm a DP, and sometimes just exclusively a DP, and then I'm very, very much an educator. I have a production company. I've had it for over 20 years, and the second sort of part of my life is the C47, which is an educational brand that's focused on teaching the craft of video production and filmmaking. And the types of work that I do are very varied. I've done a lot of educational stuff in the space in terms of manufacturers. This footage here is actually from one of two lighting courses that I've done for LinkedIn Learning on advanced cinematic and regular cinematic video lighting. And then I do a lot of corporate work. I cross over into commercial work and also narrative every once in a while in terms of the stuff that I do. And I think that that's pretty typical in terms of production nowadays. We're being asked to do a lot of different types of things, and our crews are getting smaller, which is why some of the content that I'm creating is focused on small to no crew production. So it's very common nowadays where we have 1 to 3 people. Sometimes we're lucky and we have 3 to 5, and sometimes we're really lucky and we have 5 to 10 people on a production. So cost of entry has come way down in terms of what we can do and have access to in terms of equipment, but we're being expected to produce high production value with minimal crew. And that's become even more apparent when we take a look at the corporate landscape, because in the corporate landscape we have an entire situation where companies have realized to go outside for production isn't cost effective. They started to hire outside production companies, and then they realized, very many companies have realized, that they're producing so much ongoing content that they might as well do it in-house. So they start to create small teams of in-house production. I did a workshop this weekend actually where I would say on Saturday it was corporate and in-house, and about 80% of the people who were there were working for companies and organizations and nonprofits just creating video content. So I have a website. You're supposed to have one of those. You have to have a YouTube channel nowadays. I've got one. I try. Caleb is much better than I am at that, but that's a whole nother story. The C47.com, and that's my YouTube channel. And post-NAB, I'll be producing a lot of additional content about the show and about the things that I've seen and all of that. We're going to talk a little bit about this whole thing right now, but in terms of in-depth stuff, really the Arri Academy is one way to go. Oh, we got me up there. So you guys can't see these slides. They can see them? All right, good. I don't know how it's all happening here. It's like the Wizard of Oz. No, I'm just kidding. So for in-depth training, Arri Academy, to get into things like the Alexa Mini, the Amira SXT, the new SXTW. And what I'm going to talk to you about is the Alexa Mini and the, again, relatively new Master Grips that have just come to the market. So before I do that, I want to really talk to you about this camera system and one of the reasons that we've started to use it. And one of the things that I think has happened over the last just over 2 years, and Michelle and I were talking about this, Michelle from B&H, is that this camera was not really originally designed to be an A camera. This camera was designed as a camera for drones, right? It was designed for gimbals. It was designed to take that box format and put the camera where it would be harder to put if it was a larger camera body. But the magic sauce when it comes to Arri, when it comes to their camera systems, is that they all have the same sensor. They all have the same color science. They all have and produce and have the capabilities of producing that same picture that you're going to get in an SXT, you're going to get it in an Amira, and you're of course going to get it in an Alexa Mini. So aside from the audio component, which we'll talk and touch upon in a little while in terms of some solutions that are coming out to let you do that, a lot of people are rigging out this camera to be their A camera. They're putting it on their shoulder. They're allowed to, take a much smaller form factor, and they're still getting 4.3. They can get Open Gate with a license. They can get Arri RAW with a license, and so they can really kit this out. Maybe not as many outputs on the camera system, but it is producing that Arri image with all of that color science, the build quality. These are the workhorses and sort of the pinnacle in terms of digital cinema camera systems. So we're using them now along with other things, and the first thing that we should really discuss, or I like to discuss with people because I think it's a very important conversation, is the reason that we're using cameras like this is because of where we're going in terms of the future of production. So at the moment, of course, we have small crews, high client expectations, and we're moving towards ultra high definition. So we're not even moving towards it at this point. At this point, there are more UHD televisions being sold in this country than HD televisions, which means that as content creators, we now have to become very, very serious about how we're acquiring our content, at what resolution, and how much information is inside of that image. And if somebody's buying a 65-inch UHD television that can support HDR10 or Dolby Vision or both, then we have to really think seriously about what we're capable of capturing so that we can deliver to that television. And a lot of people are watching YouTube on a television in their living room. So a lot of people say, well, it's only for the web, so I'll just produce it in HD. Well, that web content is being watched in a living room right now on a 65-inch television in UHD resolution. So we really have to think about that in terms of the content that we're creating. 4 times HD, tremendous amount of number of pixels. And then once we start to talk about the other ingredients that are in a camera system, we have a very rich image potentially. Obviously, some people are distributing in DCI 4K, but that's not really for most of us. This is really what we're concerned about, is ultra high definition, what I call 4K for the masses. Most of you know this, but resolution does not equal quality. And when we talk about a camera that's inside of our pocket, or an action camera, or a drone-based camera that's not a large camera system with a large sensor that's going up on a big drone, these are small sensor camera systems. They might have UHD resolution, but they are only as capable of their recording data rate, their bit depth, their color sampling, and all of those ingredients are really the key things to what are helping create our picture. Very key ingredients. Also, lenses. That's the first point of entry into a camera system. Take a great camera system and put a bad lens on it, and you're going to get a bad quality picture. Put a great lens on an okay camera system, and it will actually lift the quality of the image that you're getting. So lenses are very important, but the camera system itself, that's where we start to talk about all of those other things like data rate, color sampling, your bit depth, and those things are the ingredients that have a lot to do with how much you can do with your image. And then the 2 big ones, dynamic range. So how many stops can that camera capture? That's based on the sensor and then how you shoot with it. Generally, for most of us in log, sometimes in raw. So we want to get the most dynamic range in terms of from our blacks to our whites. And then the second part of the equation is a wide color gamut. And in terms of what we can see in terms of the color spectrum, it's pretty enormous. But what we need to be considering right now is how we're capturing our color space, which is different than the dynamic range. Dynamic range, this is luminance. This is blacks to whites. Then we're talking about chroma or color information. And so we talk about this wide color space. And if we take a look here on the left-hand side, we can see that smaller triangle. That's Rec. 709. So that's the color space that we're targeting right now. A lot of cameras, especially older cameras, were only capable of capturing in that color space or smaller. But we can do a lot more now, and we have to start considering that. In fact, that triangle on the right-hand side is what we call DCI P3, and that's Digital Cinema Initiative P3 color space. That's the target color space that we use for theatrical distribution. So if you're going to create something for theatrical distribution and it's going to a digital projector, generally we're targeting that particular color space. And then the largest triangle that we see over there on the left-hand side, that's Rec. 2020 or BT 2020. And that's going to be a target color space in the future, especially when we talk about things like Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision is supporting a number of frame rates, very, very high resolutions, very, very big color spaces like Rec. 2020, and of course, dynamic range, high dynamic range. In fact, it's sort of what we're calling high dynamic range is all of those ingredients, especially when we get to the consumer side. So in a practical application, and in an ideal situation, what we want to do when we're shooting with these cameras is we want to capture, as long as there's a rich enough image, as much dynamic range as we can. And we also want to capture in the largest color space that we can. And most digital cinema cameras will allow you to capture more than Rec. 709. On this camera system, when we're shooting in log C on an Alexa Mini, we're not only getting 14 plus stops of dynamic range, our luminance values, but we're also capturing a larger color space than even Rec. 2020. So then that way we have the options to target Rec. 2020, P3, Rec. 709, and just so you know, it's going to get messy in the future because right now we're using Rec. 709 LUTs. Get ready to use P3 LUTs, get ready to use Rec. 2020 LUTs. We're going to have to start pushing our content out in multiple ways. There'll be some automation out there where you'll create a Rec. 2020 version of your content. It'll have lots of stops of dynamic range, and you'll put it out to the world, and they will create these other versions for you, but then you're leaving it in the hands of an algorithm. So one of the things that we should all be thinking about in the future are displays and making sure that we're looking at displays that can at least show us P3 in terms of our color space, and ideally, eventually, Rec. 2020. Because what you'll do is on set, you'll actually cycle through and you'll apply a Rec. 2020 LUT and you'll look at that in a Rec. 2020 color space. And then you'll switch it over and you'll apply a P3 LUT and say, oh, when this gets pushed out to an audience for theatrical distribution, or guess what, iPhone 7 has P3 color space. This new MacBook Pro supports P3 color space. So we're going to be targeting these other color spaces in the future. It's coming about very, very quickly. That's trippy right now with that little camera. So it's cool. So that's really something that I wanted to talk to everybody about. And I think that that's something that you should be really considering when you're thinking about how you're acquiring your content and then also how you're monitoring your content, both in production and post-production. When we talk about small crew production, a lot of it has to do with, especially when we're taking a smaller form factor camera system, it has to do with our support accessories and how we're building the camera up and the ability to be able to do that to suit the person and the way they like to shoot. And this is a form factor that is all about building it to suit the type of application that you have. So you might use it as just a bare body, which is about a 5-pound camera body, and then you might go ahead and build it up like we have here for a shoulder-mounted, broadcast plate. Huh? I can pan it a little bit, but then they're going to have to, we have it set up for these master grips. I know. But then you'll come up here afterwards, and we'll check out the camera. So you do have to consider that. When you go with smaller form factor, you do have to make sure that you have that support. And one of the great things is that there are great accessories in terms of support for this camera system. And then it's really getting down to small crew production. And it's that idea that we need to produce high quality images in very short periods of time with very few people right there. We go back to that dynamic range thing, and I've never used a camera system that handles dynamic range better than an Alexa camera does. And it's highlight roll-off. We've all heard about it. You start comparing it to footage from other cameras, it becomes very, very apparent where the difference is. And then it's something else, which is dynamic range defines how many stops you can capture on the camera system. But the real difference for me with Alexa is what we call latitudes. It's if you underexpose or overexpose that image, how many stops can you push it and still retain and hold the image? And nothing that I've used holds an image better in terms of latitude than an Alexa camera does. So it's been really great to start to use these cameras and to start to see the results that you can get when you're shooting in log C, which gives you that wide color gamut and everything else. So I think what we're going to do is I'll just first of all introduce Daniel Fakos, who is somebody who has worked with me for a number of years. His nickname here is the Med Effect. Come on, there you go, everybody. There's a long story to that, but he's representing now. And we're going to talk a little bit about the camera body itself and how we've sort of built it up. And then we're going to get into the master grips, which to me in the last sort of 6 to 9 months is probably one of the most exciting products that I've actually used. So let's start with the camera body. First of all, just to kind of talk about this, we have a couple of parts here. These are the MSB1s. You don't have to use these, but basically they attach to different plates and things like that. We have the MAP 2 here, and it's got rod support. We have the EVF coming off of here. And the beautiful thing about all of these is that they have captive screws. So, and the other thing is that when you're building up an Alexa Mini, it's all an M3. It's one. Just, you understand how important that is. Standard Arri rosette. And what we can do is we can either have that at the top, we can have it at the bottom. I'm going to have Dan actually just mount those to the camera system. So we've already attached some of those things already. We have a broadcast plate here, which just attaches to a standard VCT base plate. This is great for a single operator. Obviously, if you're using this in a studio, we can pan it? Okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and pan it. So we have permission. So you'll see here, so he's just going ahead and attaching that there. And this is obviously great for this type of situation. I could use this in a more cinema style by just leaving it on here, but if I was going to build this up, I could build it up with 19 mil rods. I could build it up with 15 mil rods. It's an erector set. So you go over to Arri and you say, I want to build this camera for this type of application, and then you get the parts to do that. So it's pretty great. So then we're going to go ahead and just attach the second one. And then, of course, that gives us a mounting point. The difference here is that we have this broadcast plate, and so that has Arri rosettes already. And so we've actually attached our master grip handles to those rosettes as opposed to the ones that are coming off of the camera body. And that's obviously a much better place if you're using these shorter rods, but they make these rods in longer lengths. So if you did want to come straight off of the Mini, you could. But I like these because it's pulling them out a little bit further, and then that's giving us even more sort of leeway when we're adding these motors and things like that. So that's basically it. We've got the MAP 2 here. We've got 2 MSB1s, and then we've got the broadcast plate. But this MAP 2 here, that could be on the bottom if you needed to, and then you can get a spacer so you have the right height if you're going to use a follow focus system and you're going to use motors. And then we've just attached the master grips here. And that's, basically the setup. And then just so you understand how we're going to attach everything, with this particular setup here, we are using essentially a breakout power distribution box. This particular one is from Wooden Camera. And then we're going from here into here. We're getting power, obviously, from this. And then we can feed through all of these connectors, 12 volt, 24 volt power to other devices and things like that. So it just gives you this very compact power distribution network that we can use all around. Over here on this side of this PL mount, and this is, by the way, an interchangeable mount. It's 4 captive M3 screws. This is incredibly strong. You can put, you can, at a certain point, it's going to be a good idea to put a lens support, but this mount is much stronger than you're used to using on most of the camera systems you're using, and you can be very comfortable using compact cinema zooms without using a lens support, which kind of freaks you out the first couple of times that you do it, but that mount is built for that. But if I wanted to switch this over to an EF mount, all I would have to do is take the lens off, 4 screws, captive, comes off, put the EF mount version on it, tighten it down, and away you go. If you have back or front focus problems because of the way they build this camera, it's the lens. So it's pretty amazing in terms of what you can do. This particular one has an L bus or lens bus, this PL mount, which can power and also capture and pass metadata. So the idea here is that this is what we're going to use. I don't have to, though. There is a little box that Arri makes. If I wanted to use these master grips on a different camera system from a different manufacturer, then all I would have to do is basically use that little box to get power and then convert it to this lens bus basically protocol. And then it's a daisy chain. So we're going to run one cable from here, and then we can run it either into a motor or into the master grip, and then we daisy chain it, and then it passes power and communication through all of those things. You can get them in different lengths. So I think, Dan, we should just probably start to plug all of these in, and then first place we're going to plug it into is that L bus on that right side of the camera system. And then the way it's configured here, we're going into the first, this is a C-Force Mini, and this is our motor, and then we also have another C-Force Mini on the other side. There is a larger version of the C-Force, which is basically for higher torque, so when you're using certain and particular lens systems, you can use that. For a lens like this, it's not a problem. We can use the Minis, and those work out very well. An additional way, if you're using an Alexa Mini, that you could configure this is we can use the EXT output here, the external output. I could run that to one of the master grips. I could go from another, so basically it's EXT to L bus, and then L bus to another master grip, and then we just daisy chain to all of the different motors that are inside of the chain. So that's basically what we have going on here in terms of the hookup. Now, these motors support full fizz, so focus iris zoom. Right now we're only using 2 motors because we have a prime lens, but if we were on a cinema zoom, then of course we could gear it up for all 3 of those. And Dan's just going to go ahead and attach those to take those motors, and then he's going to basically gear that all up. And the trick is to really secure that into place, because the way the master grips work is as soon as we turn on the camera system and the master grips come up, they're going to automatically ask you to calibrate. So what we'll do is we will, Dan's going to turn it on. He's going to go ahead and assign, and let's just turn it, Dan, oh, they can see. But let's just make sure that they can see the FIZ here for the fizz, and then just you cycling through, or I'll just cycle through so you guys can see that. So we can cycle through and assign what that particular motor is doing. And then once that's actually done, and then you do that with the motor on the other side, then we can actually go ahead and start to calibrate. So Dan's just going to go ahead, and he's got that one set to, where do you want that one on? You're good? That's focus. And then he's going to set the other one to iris. So that'll be set to eye on the other side. And then let's go ahead and see that close-up of the master grip handles here. And do we need to, yeah, we'll do a little tilt there. And just a little bit more. It's like bringing in a slate with the reflections. There we go, pretty good. Okay, so you guys can see that, right? So now it's just swipe up. So you can only use this with lenses, clearly, with hard stops, because what it's going to do now is it's going to calibrate. Close focus, infinity, and you want to do both of them? Just swipe. Yeah, let's go ahead. So we're going to do focus, and then we can calibrate the other one. So you guys can see that. So basically it's doing an auto calibration. And then every time you turn this on, you'll want to calibrate. Obviously, you need to calibrate when you put different lenses on there. So it's going to cycle through that. And then we'll do the same thing. I'll swipe up on here. So let's go ahead. Did it swipe up? Yep, there you go. So now we're calibrating our iris. And that's the first step. in terms of using the master grip. And it doesn't matter if you had this on a different camera system, you would still turn on the master grips. You have to give them power, and it would ask you to swipe up to calibrate, and then it would go ahead and calibrate to those. So now we're just going to go ahead and pan that and get back onto the handles. And now you can see that we have, so there's 2 different types of master grips, actually 4 different types of master grips. There's a left wheel and a right rocker. I mean, I'll say that a different way. There's a left wheel and a left rocker, and there's a right wheel and a right rocker. And so you can decide. And you don't have to buy 2. So the nice thing about these is that you can actually, I'll have Dan, you want to do that now, where we just unplug one and we just assign it to both? Or you want to do that in a little while? Do that in a little while. Yeah, but basically what you can do is if you only have one master grip, you can actually cycle through, and while you're shooting, you can switch it between focus, iris, and zoom. So you can, in fact, use one master grip to do multiple jobs if you want to. Really, in a real-world production environment, we would normally want to have at least focus, and we would want to have iris, so you can see, in terms of that. But if you were going to go ahead and use a cine zoom or some sort of zoom lens, then you'd want to take that rocker and you'd want to assign it to the zoom on there. So you can see here right now we're actually showing our focus, and because we are plugged into this L bus and because we have this protocol that's going between the Alexa Mini, all of that information is being passed through as information on the master grip. And this is actually a touch screen. So Dan's just going to start to swipe through the different menus here. Those are all assignable. In fact, let's go back to that previous one and let's just turn this around. Or, oh, well, you can actually see it here. Yeah. So we actually have the wheel or the rocker itself. We have the control system, which is sitting on the top of the master grip. And then we also have 2 other buttons, but they're much more than buttons. We have the red one on the rocker or the wheel, and then we also have the joystick. And the joystick has 5 positions, left, right, up, and down. And then if you depress it, that's also another action. And this is all assignable. In fact, with the new firmware that they just came out with master grips, you can put the EF lens mount onto this camera system, and you can actually change iris, and it's a stepless iris. So I just saw it over a couple of days ago at the Arri booth, and it's very, very smooth in terms of what you can do. You can even set curves in terms of that. Yeah, let's go ahead and assign that. So one of the things we'd want to do here, so on this particular one here, Dan's just going to go ahead and hold down the button, and then we can see that there are all of those user button options, but then there are some presets, and he's going to go ahead and set that to up is going to be speed up, down is going to be speed down, so we're programming that to do that. And then he's going to do that, so speed up on the up joystick. Now he's going to do speed down on the up. We got to go back, Dan. That's a speed +2. Let's go and make sure that's on minus. And bingo. Good. And yeah, let's demo it. So now, should we turn the... Yep, so let's turn it. So that's slow. You guys can't see the gear, though. And then go ahead and go up and down on the joystick, and you'll see it's 1-to-1. And then it's going faster, and then we can do a 4-to-1. And it's very fast. So now let me turn this so you guys can see it. Dan, I'm going to just pan it, and now do the same thing. And we can just go up and down so you guys can see. So there it is in terms of that speed. And we can increase the speed, or we can decrease the speed using just that little joystick. Incredible control. So if you think about this in terms of being a single operator, and you've got your eye on your EVF, how's it going? If you got your eye on your EVF and you can just start to program all this stuff, this is all touch-based. So you're sitting there as a single operator, you are pulling focus. Let's show them. This is the best. So we're going to go ahead and... Yeah, we're going to set limits.
Okay, so you want to show them programming?
Yeah, we're going to show programming first. So let's get over here on the left grip, if that's cool. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to show you how to set limits on here. So this way you can do a pull yourself, but we're setting limits on where that pull is going to be. So just so that you can see how that is. And are you going to assign that also? Yeah. So limit is being set to the left position of the joystick. So now what Dan is going to do is he's going to go ahead and let's just set that. Right now we're at 4 feet, 4.5 feet. He hit it to the left on the joystick. That sets the first limit. And then he's going to go to whatever his next focus point is and then just hit to the left on the joystick. And now we have actually set limits on there. So from a follow focus system perspective, pretty amazing in terms of what you can do. Again, it's this whole idea of being a single operator and having that camera up on your shoulder and not constantly having to take the camera off your shoulder. And because we can actually see the screen and all of that metadata is being transferred between the camera system and the master grips, we have tremendous control in terms of what we can do with this system. So it's a fantastic combination. So we look at this as a package together, yes, but also the fact that these master grips can be used very easily with another camera system. Because really the key is, okay, maybe we're not getting all of the same lens metadata. If you're shooting a special effects, visual effects movie, that's really important. Shoot it on Alexa, get all of that data in there. They want to match that stuff when they're going to go in and they're going to do all of that stuff in post-production. They're going to build a CG environment. But if you're going in and you're just taking one of your other digital cinema cameras, what you need to do essentially is get power to that. That's the key, is getting power to that. And then, of course, if you're using standard cine lenses, you're not concerned about the fact that you're trying to communicate with the camera to change the iris. You're really concerned about the fact that those are sitting on the barrel of the lens. So when you're changing your iris, you're changing your focus, you're changing your zoom, that can all be done with master grips on any camera system as long as you have a lens that's geared for those different elements. So for us, it's really changed, and I think will continue to change how we approach using smaller camera systems. And Dan is also an occasional, while he's a director, he has a background as being an AC and also a DIT. And when you're an AC, you can even use this system in other ways, but I think for us, it's just become something that has allowed us to do some very interesting things. I'm actually going to bring something up on the computer system now, just in terms of talking about a recent production that we did. And let me just go ahead and bring that up. So, whoa, don't look at that. You're not supposed to see that footage over there. But this is a recent production that we did for a company that's coming out in a few days. And basically, I'm up on the footage in terms of what you see there. But it was a shoot that we did for a company in the industry, and then we had Billy Bob Thornton, who was on there. So again, tremendous amount of control, really geared towards single operators in many situations. We still will go with the traditional flow when we talk about pulling focus and remote follow focus systems. That's a whole other area. But when we get a camera up on our shoulders, or even when we're built out in a studio environment, we can use the master grips to give us tremendous control in terms of what we do, scratching the surface. Feel free to go over to Arri's booth and check some stuff out. And thank you very much.